Oh, it's great to have your company. You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. My name's Simon Smart, and I want to introduce Natasha Moore, who's in the chair for Justine Toe. So Justine's voice hasn't changed. Welcome, Natasha. Great to have you on board.
Thanks, Simon. Good to be here.
Now, the latest science fiction blockbuster is in the vein of The Hunger Games. Some people have said that. It's called Divergent. It's out in cinemas. It's based on the book trilogy by Veronica Roth. The story's set in a dystopian, post-apocalyptic version of Chicago, and the book has proved enormously popular. The film, well, we'll wait and see. Larissa Aldridge has seen the film. She's read the book as well. Good to have you in to talk about it, Larissa.
It's good to be here.
Now, let's talk about this. You've read the books and you've seen the film. For those of us, and that's me included, who are not familiar with this trilogy, can you explain the premise of the story? What's Divergent about?
The premise of Divergent is that in this post-war city of Chicago, the citizens of the society has divided itself into 5 factions as a way to ensure lasting peace. And the factions are divided up depending on which character trait they most value and they think is most important for maintaining peace. So you have the faction called Abnegation, which are all about selflessness and service. You have Candor, which is all about telling the truth, even if it hurts. There's Dauntless, which is about bravery. Erudite, which is the intellectual faction. And Amity, which is the kind, compassionate and peaceful faction.
The whole of the society's been divided into these groups, or just particular people?
The whole of society is intended to fit into one of these groups. There are also people known as factionless that for one reason or another don't fit into one group or have left their faction for some reason or failed initiation into the faction, and they're very much the underclass, the outsiders, the excluded sort of people who aren't living in community. Children, when they're born, they're brought up in their parents' faction until the age of 16, when they undertake an aptitude test to determine which faction they belong to. And then they make a choice as to whether to stay in their parents' faction or to choose a new one. And that choice is for the rest of their life. There's no going back once you've made the choice. Now, the book and the movie of Divergent follows the story of Beatrice Pryor, who is just about to undertake her test and make her choice. She comes from the Abnegation faction, but she's always felt that she doesn't fit in. She doesn't feel that she's selfless enough. She looks at her family and the way that they're always thinking of others and always looking for ways to serve others, and she feels it's too difficult for her. And if she truly belonged there, it would be easy. And at the same time, she's also always admired the Dauntless faction. She sees the students arriving on the train at school and they don't just get off at a platform, they all jump off moving trains and they're very carefree and wild, and she admires something about that. So she's faced with a choice as to whether to stay with her family and try to be more selfless or to take the courageous step of transferring to the Dauntless faction. Now, to complicate matters, when she takes her aptitude test, her results come back inconclusive. She actually shows aptitude for 3 factions: Abnegation, Dauntless, and Erudite. This is very rare. It's known as being divergent, hence the title, and it's considered a danger. It's a threat to society if people don't fit in to one of these factions.
You nervous?
How are you for your test?
No, I was terrified.
The only way our society can survive is for each of you to claim your rightful place. Today, you will take a test that will help you discover who you truly are. The future belongs to those who know where they belong. You ready?
This isn't real.
Your results were inconclusive.
This was supposed to tell me what to do. We're supposed to trust the test.
Didn't work on you. They call it Divergent. You can't let them find out about you. They're always watching. You have to hide, or they'd never expect to find you.
So Larissa, obviously one of the big themes of Divergent then is to do with choice. All the characters get sorted into one of these factions, but they also get to choose their faction. So is there kind of a tension in the novel and in the film between self-determination, between really choosing your fate as opposed to kind of being preset and being a victim of your genes or your family or your personality type, that kind of thing?
There is a tension, particularly for Beatrice, because she doesn't have a clear sense of where she belongs. But for the majority of people in this society, it's about knowing who they are and knowing where they belong. The aptitude test helps them to know that, but they also have kind of an internal sense of who they are and make the choice according to that kind of sense of identity. So they're told they have a choice on the one hand, but on the other, it's not really a choice. It's about fitting in, knowing what your identity is and knowing where you belong.
So one of the most compelling things about the story is this division into the 5 factions. And I guess this is a real human tendency that we want to classify or sort ourselves. You know, we do these Myers-Briggs personality tests, that kind of thing, to figure out, you know, who am I? What does this tell me about why I respond the way that I do? Why do you think this is such a key part of the story in Divergent, and why is it so appealing to us?
I think because of what you say about we have this innate tendency to sort ourselves into groups, but also because these groups are what ensure community in the society. We all want to belong somewhere. We want to know what our place is, where we can contribute, where we can meet with like-minded people who understand us. And the way this society is set up, it's a very rigid system. The only way you can live in community with people and have a comfortable life is if you fit into one of these factions. And so the people who don't fit in or who somehow fail the training or are exiled from their faction, they're living in the worst sort of conditions and they're cut off from the rest of society. And I think that's something that no one really wants.
There's incredible pressure to conform then in a very structured manner, but it reflects perhaps something of the life of young adults, and this is young adult fiction, so it's probably tapping into something they're all pretty aware of.
Yes, I think particularly it's tapping into the kinds of choices that teenagers and young adults are faced with. The author of the trilogy, Veronica Roth, she wrote the first book when she was only 21. She was a college student. She'd been recently faced with decisions about what to do with the rest of her life, what kind of career to pursue, what course of study to take. These are the kinds of questions that are high on the agenda of teenagers and young people. And when you're that age, there's a sense of import to them that is perhaps a bit out of proportion. Once you're older, you realise that the choices you make as a teenager don't define the rest of your life. But when you're in the middle of making them, it certainly seems as though they do. So for Beatrice, as a teenager in this society, the choice she's making really does determine the rest of her life. She can't go back to her parents' faction once she's chosen to leave. And I think that reflects how important these kinds of decisions feel for teenagers, even in our society.
You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. We have Larissa Aldridge with us, and we're talking about the film, following on from the book, Divergent. Now, the author of these books, Veronica Roth, has been very open about her Christian faith. People have been sort of assessing the story in light of that. Now, it's not a Christian book, but are there things in the Christian story that might help you understand the novel better, or perhaps where she's coming from? She
has her characters struggling with the same kinds of issues that she herself, as a Christian, sometimes struggles with questions of who God is and what our place is, questions of morality and character.
Welcome to Dauntless. 2 stages of training. The first is physical. Push your bodies to the breaking point. You're never gonna win, not like that.
It's good to know.
Keep tension here, okay? The second is mental. Face your worst fears and conquer them.
You made a mistake choosing Dauntless. He'll find out about you.
I know what you are. It's been a long time since I could trust anyone. I don't want to be just one thing. I want to be brave and selfless and intelligent and honest and kind.
So one of the things that Beatrice thinks about a lot, and the choices that come up for her, are to do with sacrifice.
So Beatrice in this story, she has this constant struggle between being selfless and being brave. In her original faction of abnegation, she feels she doesn't fit because she's not selfless enough. She joins the Dauntless faction, and through the process of training becomes very brave, or recognises that she is brave. But what's really interesting about it is her bravery actually stems from her selflessness. It's when others are at risk, when she can step in to stand up for someone else, that she's at her most brave. And one of the questions that she struggles with in Divergent and in the subsequent books of the trilogy is, what makes a sacrifice good? Or what is a good reason to risk your life for someone else? Now, the Dauntless faction is all about bravery, which in itself is a good thing. And the faction manifesto, the sort of statement of values of the faction, says that they believe in ordinary acts of bravery and in the courage that drives a person to stand up for someone else. But this value of bravery and ordinary acts of bravery has become distorted, and instead of ordinary acts of bravery, they now engage in these sort of extraordinary acts of recklessness and endangerment. And Beatrice has to sort of come to terms with this and understand when it is a good time to risk one's life and when that is a sacrificial act and when it's simply recklessness.
Well, that's the fascinating element of the story for me, Larissa, where they've separated out bravery from selflessness. Whereas we often, when talking to young people, trying to get them to think about combining those two things, of courage in the service of other people. I mean, I, for instance, could be, I'm not, but a very brave base jumper.
In which case you'd fit in well with Dauntless.
Oh yeah, okay, all right. Well, yes, that for sure. And yeah, I could do that and be utterly selfish and not interested in other people. I suppose this is an interesting element to this, where they're trying to think about the ways in which those two things could be combined. Well, that could be timely given these holidays that are coming up in Australia, both Easter and Anzac Day, both of which are stories that combine bravery, incredible courage in the service of other people. We've been talking about Divergent. Larissa Aldridge has been here to do that. Thanks so much for coming in, Larissa.
Thank you for having me.
Follow me.
Divergents threaten the system. It won't be safe until they're removed.
We have to fight back.
Ready?